Marissa hugged her coat tightly around her shoulders as the icy wind cut through the empty streets of the city. She counted the last $10 in her wallet, hoping it would be enough to buy a bus ticket home for Christmas Eve, and she told herself that she could make it through the night, even if it was freezing cold outside. The bus stop was quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft crunch of snow under her boots, and she tried not to think about the hospital where her grandmother waited. Her heart ached with worry and anticipation, and she could feel the weight of every second passing like a ticking clock. She could not slow down. She handed the last $10 to the bus driver, her hands trembling from the cold, and relief washed over her when he nodded and tore the ticket from the roll, and she stepped inside the warm bus, grateful for the tiny victory, and she found an empty seat near the window, her breath fogging against the glass as she watched the city blur past. For Marissa closed her eyes for a moment and tried to imagine the smile on her grandmother's face when she arrived. She thought about the stories her grandmother used to tell and the cookies they would bake together, and a sense of hope and anticipation warmed her chest for a fleeting instant. But then she noticed the bus slowing down in a strange way, and a knot of unease tightened in her stomach. As the driver glanced nervously at the road ahead, the bus came to a sudden stop on a dark, deserted street, and the driver muttered something under his breath before getting out to inspect the engine. Marissa realized she had no way to contact anyone, and the cold started creeping through the bus windows. She wrapped her arms around herself and wondered how long she would be stranded here, and if anyone would notice her missing. And then she heard a sound behind her that made her spine stiffen. A soft crunch echoed against the pavement, and Marissa turned to the window just in time to see headlights cutting through the darkness. A limousine slowed as it approached the bus, and her pulse quickened because it seemed impossibly out of place in this empty street. And the driver inside the limousine stared straight at her, as if he had been waiting for this very moment, and she shivered with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The limousine stopped right in front of the bus, and the window began to roll down, revealing a man dressed in dark clothes, his eyes sharp and his expression unreadable. He spoke her name in a calm, low voice, and Marissa froze, unable to move or respond, and she realized that she had never seen this man before. Yet somehow he knew exactly who she was, and the cold night seemed to hold its breath as she waited for his next words. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible situation, and she wondered if she was dreaming or if someone had orchestrated this moment deliberately. And the bus engine sputtered behind her, while the limousine idled quietly, and she felt a sudden pull to leave the safety of the bus and step toward the vehicle. But a small voice in her head warned her that the next few moments could change everything she thought she knew about her life. Marissa slowly stepped off the bus, and the snow crunched under her boots as she approached the limousine. The man inside gestured for her to come closer, and she hesitated for a heartbeat before curiosity and a strange sense of destiny overcame her fear, and she leaned forward to hear what he had to say. And the air between them seemed to tighten, as if it held a secret she was not yet ready to understand. The limousine door opened with a soft click, and Marissa felt the warm air from inside rush past her freezing fingers. And for a moment she imagined 1,000 different possibilities of who this man was and why he knew her name. And then she heard him speak again, and his words hinted at a connection she could not yet comprehend. And the limousine seemed to wait patiently, as if it held the key to everything she had been searching for on this cold Christmas Eve. She glanced around at the empty street, noticing the bus behind her abandoned and the snow falling thicker now, and she realized that stepping into the limousine would take her into a world she had never imagined. And the thought of what awaited inside made her breath catch and her heart pound as she reached for the door handle, and a sudden shadow passed across the street, leaving her wondering if she was truly alone, or if someone had been watching her all along. Marissa paused her hand on the cool handle and looked back at the bus for one last fleeting moment, her eyes scanning the empty windows and darkened streets. And she felt a shiver of both fear and anticipation, as if the night itself was holding its breath. And then she turned back toward the limousine, ready to step inside, knowing that the next few minutes could change everything she believed about luck, destiny, and miracles. And she hesitated just long enough to hear the soft whisper of a snowflake land on her shoulder, and wondered if it was a sign of what was coming. Next, Marissa took a deep breath and pushed the limousine door open, stepping inside, feeling the warmth wash over her, and the leather seats seemed impossibly soft against her coat. And the man motioned for her to sit, while keeping his eyes fixed on the street outside, as though he expected something to appear at any moment, and she wondered why he had stopped here. In the middle of nowhere, the interior smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon, and a soft music played somewhere beneath the hum of the engine, and Marissa noticed that the car was filled with a quiet stillness that made the feel heavy with anticipation, and she tried to ask who he was, but the words caught in her throat, because the man only smiled slightly and said nothing, leaving her staring at him with more questions than answers. After a few moments, the limousine began to move smoothly along the snow-covered streets, and Marissa looked out the window at the city lights, glowing faintly behind the falling snow, and she realized that she had no idea where they were going, and the thought of giving herself completely to this stranger filled her with both excitement and fear. And she clutched the edge of her seat, waiting for him to speak. Finally, he turned to her, his expression serious, and his voice calm but urgent. He told her that her grandmother had once helped someone who had lost everything, and that person had promised that one day they would return the favor. And now the time had come, and Marissa stared at him incredulously, because she had never expected that someone would know about her family, or her grandmother, and a strange warmth spread through her chest, even as her mind raced to understand the impossible. The limousine slowed to a stop in front of a small, old house covered in snow, and Marissa noticed that the windows glowed warmly with light inside, and the man stepped out and opened her door. And for a moment, she hesitated, because she could not understand how someone she had never met could know her story, and yet every instinct told her to follow him, and she stepped onto the snow-crusted ground and shivered in anticipation of what awaited in sights. They entered the house. Marissa smelled the familiar scent of baked cookies and old wood, and saw her grandmother sitting in a chair, her eyes wide and sparkling with tears and relief. And for a moment, Marissa felt like she was dreaming, because the reunion seemed too perfect to be real, and yet her grandmother reached out her arms and called her name, leaving Marissa unable to resist the pull of family and love. She had almost lost the man who had brought her inside, remained quietly in the background, and then he handed Marissa a small envelope saying that her grandmother had asked him to give it to her. He explained that it contained instructions and gifts that would help her in ways she could not yet imagine, and Marissa felt a shiver run down her spine, because she sensed that the envelope held more than just paper and money. It carried a future she had never dared to dream about. As Marissa opened the envelope, she found a letter and a key, and she read the words carefully, each one echoing the kindness and generosity of the stranger who had delivered her safely home. And the key led to a small safe deposit box her grandmother had arranged years before, and Marissa realized that this was the miracle the limousine had brought her, a chance to start anew, and the weight of it filled her heart with both gratitude and awe. Snow continued to fall softly outside, covering the streets in a quiet blanket, and Marissa looked out the window and wondered if the man would simply disappear into the night, or if he had a greater role in her life. Yet she sensed that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved, and that the magic of the evening had been delivered exactly when it was needed most, leaving her to smile with tears in her eyes and a heart full of hope as she hugged her grandmother tightly, and, as the limousine pulled away into the darkness, Marissa realized that her last $10 had led her to something far greater than a bus ride or a simple journey home. It had led her to a moment of destiny, a miracle she could never have imagined, and she watched the lights fade from view, knowing that the night had changed her life forever, and that what came next would be guided by the kindness of strangers and the warmth of family she had almost lost.